Hello and welcome back, and that's right, today we're looking at this, the Synology TC500, their second IP camera for surveillance station. I've already reviewed their first camera, that was this, the BC500, and you'll have to forgive me, I am going to make this review just a little bit shorter than that last one, simply because the specifications for these two cameras are so frightfully similar. But in today's video, I want to make a few more direct comparisons between alternatives from companies like Reolink, from Ank, from Hikvision, Amcrest, and more. Why is that? Because a lot of users are wondering about whether to swap out their existing cameras in their Synology surveillance station setup for Synology cameras, or they're about to make their first tippy toes into the world of utilising a Synology NAS for surveillance, and as soon as they heard out that there was a single ecosystem first party camera, something that no other NAS brand has done till now, they got real interested. I have waited a long time to see Synology, or any brand for that matter, released in the world of NAS their own surveillance cameras. It's always been something of an open goal as far as I'm concerned, because, you know, Synology along with other brands not only produce a fantastic first party network attached storage system, but on top of that they also provide individual applications and services, some of which personally I think are worth the price of admission on their own, and very few compete more in my mind than Synology's surveillance station, the best surveillance platform out there, whether it is you're buying the NAS for the NVR or as an additional extra to make the most of your investment. Now, this camera from then, if we would quickly summarise, we're not going to do the unboxing, you know, a box looks like. You've got the warranty, the manual, it's got 3 years of warranty, you've got the cover there for the PoE, you've got screws for putting it in the wall. I'm not going to waste your time with that anymore. This device here arrives with a 5 megapixel lens, resolution maximum 2880 by 1620 pixel there, and again that's at 30 frames per second. That may sound familiar because I have talked about other cameras on the channel that have not a dissimilar value to that in terms of their hardware, and they cost a lot less. So the question remains that at that baseline specification, is this camera actually worth the 250 to 300 nicker that Synology are asking for on this? And I would say for most users, yes, I do think it's justified for specific, and I would argue more than half the Synology user base, certainly. Why is that? Because this is a business class camera for a business class surveillance setup. If you're a home user running a Synology J series, a Play series, or something small ARM based, even some of the early dual or quad core Intel stuff, unless you're using it for dedicated surveillance, this camera might not be for you. You can utilise it, and certainly you can take advantage of its hardware features and some of the on-edge kind of AI recognition that we'll talk about later on. But if you are a higher-end business user, SMB user, someone that's got a multi-site deployment in mind, and you're going to have multiple cameras dotted inside and outside of your business, this is very much targeted towards you, and I think in most cases you will see the benefits. But let's talk about that hardware value just a little bit. The viewing angle is 110 degrees, the field of view there, and although it doesn't have optical zoom, you've got your standard digital zoom, and then you've got the features of functionality of surveillance station to really take advantage of that. It's a dual stream setup there, so you've got that first stream as mentioned that you can go up to 30 frames at that max resolution, but there's a substream that you can either run at 1080p at 15 frames per second or 720p at 30 frames per second there. It's got night vision, 30 feet night vision there, and again with HDR support actually makes it pretty darn clear there. It doesn't have colour night vision, sadly, like some of the other brands out there, but still nonetheless, it's not too shabby in terms of its capabilities. It records in either H.264 or H.265, depending on what you want. And you may have noticed it is PoE. That is Power over Ethernet. Now, there is a cover, you know, when you can run it into a PoE switch you've got knocking around. And again, most high-end surveillance setups tend to be PoE these days because of accessibility towards power. But still, a lot of users, particularly at that price point, would have loved to see a PoE injector. What I mean by that, that is a standard mains power adapter that goes in so you don't have to rely just on the PoE. Still means you're going to need network connectivity because this is not a Wi-Fi camera, but still, that is a darn shame that they don't include a power injector there for PoE at that price tag. Now, again, it's 1 gig there, no Wi-Fi is mentioned, you're not going to need more than 1 gig. This is a 5 megapixel, not 4K running there in the background. There is, if we move the camera up, an SD card slot there, and that SD card slot, you can pop in a micro SD, which can be utilized for SD edge recording. Now, what that means is when the device is recording to your local area network, be it to a NAS or utilizing Synology's C2 surveillance platform, when it's recording to that, if the network fails, if the NAS is broken or stolen, if remote access connectivity is completely severed, the camera will switch over to recording on the SD card slot. And what that means is when connection is re-established with the camera, it can then resume and resync all of those recordings there in the background. A very, very useful feature. But that is a feature that's possible on other third-party cameras. So I can't really give it all the, Johnny Big Guns for having that feature simply because it's already available elsewhere. Now, things that it does have that other cameras do not when you use them with the Synology is lots of little things. One, audio sensitivity. So it has audio in and out, and when I went into the settings that you'll see later on, you can configure these cameras to notice high volume, high decibel levels around them and have an alert for that, something I've not seen on lots of cameras. Likewise, features that are built into it specific to Synology is to do with that recognition. Now, referred to as edge level recognition or edge level AI recognition, this camera knows the difference between humans, vehicles, and just general motion. It doesn't extend beyond that, it has to be said for now, because almost certainly it will improve over time in firmware updates. But for example, like a lot of cameras out there that we've talked about before, it understands what a human is. So if a human walks into field and you want to know, I hate seagulls, well, you might want to know I hate seagulls, I bloody well hate them today. When you've got that camera feed, you might have trees moving, you might have cars moving around, you might have all kinds of stuff. But what you want to know is when a person moves into the field of view, specifically if they're going towards a door, an area that you've designated to be monitored, you want to know when a person goes towards it. This camera will tell you. The same thing it will tell you if a person comes along and doesn't move away from a spot from a certain period of time. So it knows what a human is, but it will not alert you if you set it up to it won't alert you unless that person doesn't leave that area for a given period of time, loitering, and then you get the notification. Same goes for crowds as well. Now, when it comes to vehicles, you can create either an area that you want to know if a vehicle enters this area and nowhere else, or you can have areas of effect and lines of effect, such as intrusion zones, that allow you to know when a person or a vehicle, again, very important that it's either of those, cross into an area there. All of that is managed by the camera, which allows the NAS to not have to process all of those things, somewhere where you would normally need a much more powerful NAS in order to get those things done. Now, alongside that, alongside a lot of seagulls today, you have got the idea of the instant search functionality. That gives you the ability to select an area on the feed and go, I want to know everything that occurred in this area here of the feed over the last 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever days, and I want to order to have those notifications within that period. I don't want the whole feed, just that area. What that allows you to do is, it's one thing to set up rules for later down the line which then get registered, such as the intrusion, the cars, the people, or whatever. But what if you were working in the past tense and you want to know if and when those things happened in the past? Smart search, instant search, I should say, allows you to look into the past with those parameters. So it allows you to say, I want to know whether a person entered this area in the past for the last few years and go through the old recordings. This camera supports that functionality there. Now, talking about support, you don't need a camera license. Anyone that's ever utilized Synology cameras, and again, this is quite a sturdy little camera. Anyone that's ever used third-party cameras in their home or business environment, when you're weighing up things like production quality, the brand, the price, one of the things that a lot of people overlook with third-party cameras is Synology NASs only come with 2 camera licenses, with a few exceptions. More on that later. Now, those 2 camera licenses support thousands of different cameras on Synology's compatibility list. But once you exceed that, you need to buy licenses to add more cameras. Those licenses last forever, and it's a good way for the brand to subsidize future developments and allow smaller users to make the most of the software, and larger enterprise users that may rely on it for corporate insurance or staff protection and their assets actually have to subsidize it a bit more. Though in those scenarios you need to buy a license, which can retail anywhere from 30 to 50 nicker depending on which bulk packs you buy. Now, this camera doesn't need that. You just add it to any Synology NAS, you won't need an additional license, which means if you've already got a fully fledged setup, but you don't want to start buying more licenses, you may find that this camera and the savings that are possible, thanks to that lack of license being needed, may push you over the edge to go for it. Now, again, those licenses are 30 to 50 nicker, depending on whether you go for bulk packs, and this is still a 250, 300 nicker camera at the time of launch. That's a big ask when you compare it against similar cameras at a similar price point that are about 100, 120 nicker. What else is this bringing to the party? Well, as mentioned, it's quite a rugged little camera with IP67 weatherproofing and IK10 vandal-proof protection. If it gets smacked around a little bit, that's going to be appealing. Also, it is, and I get the letters right, NDAA and TAA certified. That means not only, as you know, alongside its encrypted recordings if you choose to go down that road, but also it means that a lot of businesses and corporations in the US can go for this camera when, you know, sometimes for legal purposes or sometimes for just peace of mind, they may not want to go for cameras that are not on the US approved trade list, be it for fair trade policies or because of security concerns. I think we all know what I'm talking about here when we're talking about the US-China trade war and Huawei, as we've discussed previously in terms of hardware shortages. But this is not subject to any of those problems because it has NDAA and TAA certification and support there. So again, a lot of you bigger businesses out there, that is going to be music to your ears. But that's enough of that about what this camera is capable of. You want to see the proof in the pudding. So let's make our way over to a Synology NAS running Surveillance Station 9.1.1 with this camera and that other camera as well, just to see what it's capable of and just how customizable and usable it is. So here we are on the feed of Surveillance Station 9 running on a DVA 1622 NAS. More on that later on. Well, you may also notice I've got a couple of cameras here, the BC500 and the TC500. Now, I'm doing two separate reviews on these cameras, but as they are hugely identical in terms of hardware specification, it's really a case of one of them being a bullet and the other one being a turret style. I'm including this software overview in both reviews, so I apologise for the repetition if you come from that video into this one. But as you can see, the picture quality is not too shabby. We've got it here on screen. The reason I've gone for a DVA 1622, by the way, is because it is going to be worth talking about what some of the on-camera edge AI stuff is and what it isn't, because it's going to be easy to show it off on the DVA 1622. On the feed here, though, we've got on the top here the individual feeds for the BC500 and the TC500, and we've gone for a zoomed-in patch here. So again, what we can do at any point is we can look at each of these. We can add ourselves a brand new fresh screen here, and we'll leave those two running on the side. And again, fairly standard stuff. If we choose, we can do that instant search mode that we've talked about before. Instant search mode, for those that aren't aware, allows you to look into the history of a camera feed to see certain events and stuff that has happened over a certain period of time within there. You do need to take advantage of the smart search functionality to do that more broadly, but this does allow you to look into the history of a certain area on a field of play to see everything that's happened there in the past. And a lot of that is made possible thanks to a lot of that on-edge supported kind of smart recognition services there. Now, if we go into the individual cameras themselves and their settings, I've already got a bunch of different cameras here enabled. Let's bring that up again. So, for example, not only have I got a couple of generic ONVIF cameras from Reolink there to compare against, we've also got a Pixel 6 Pro here running in the background there, running with the smart cam there in the background. Not hugely important, but it just wanted to sort of highlight some of the differences in the way the cameras are handled. So, for example, if we use this generic ONVIF here, and again, depending on the camera you use, the range of services you have will differ. Some of them, say ARM-Crest cameras, you can use some of the AI supported services, and some of them with the detection settings, you can actually use some of the camera stuff. But as you can see from these individual cameras, you've still got a lot of customization there in terms of the feed, and depending on the third-party camera you use, you've still got the use of masks, you've still got the use of the watermark there. Encrypted recordings are heavily based on the device you are using, and not just the camera but also the NAS. If you make your way in to the recording pans, again, depending on the camera you choose, the number of options will change. You've got that dual recording as well if you want to kind of have that as a backup with another destination. The options are pretty similar to what you would expect there. Now, how does that compare against one of the Synology cameras? Well, let's have a look. The The Synology camera, as you can see here, has got a lot more of those on-edge analytical stuff. So straight away, some of the options there with regards to access and security protocol are very much there from the outset. If we go into the audio visual capabilities, you've got the option to flick between the two different compression methods, and actually a decent amount of flexibility in terms of the frame rate and the bit rate that can be utilized in between the balanced and normal mode that you can flick between on the fly. You can even change a lot of the default settings of the camera. You can't play with the day and night too much. You can have the day-night cycle be automated or set manually if you choose, or on your own, you know, distinct schedule. Some regions of the world, their day-night cycle is slightly more flexible. But overall, the options for configuration and changing are fairly standard there, although there's a couple of Synology twists in there. What I'm saying is, although the settings aren't awe-inspiring, the fact that you have all of them, when I've tested cameras on this channel for Anker and a few from Reolink that didn't have all of these options, make it stand out. Now, again, you can choose how you want the recording quality, either in the client application you're seeing me use there, or even in the web browser, which again, you can access this camera via the web browser with the supported compression ratio. It's all there. So the camera doesn't restrict any of the Surveillance Station 9 stuff there, and we wouldn't have expected it to. The only thing I will add is, when we come down to it, the analytical side of things, you're kind of getting half the party versus a DVA NAS. Recording patterns, whether you're going to be utilising the same that you've seen before, or you want to utilise things like the use of SD cards within the camera to create a kind of failover there for edge recording. Those are supported on the system for you to take advantage of on the fly very easily within the camera and its own available SD card slot. Pretty much everything you would expect from a camera is here, and Synology haven't reinvented the wheel too much in terms of recording pattern. I will say though that because they did also roll out their Synology C2 service, which allows you to have that dual destination recording there for redundancy in case cameras get smashed or the NAS gets stolen, and also, unlike some cameras that may or may not have support with the SD card slot, their cameras do have that support built in, with that edge recording there being enablable straight off the bat. Now, let's face it, one of the reasons you're going to go for this camera, other than the surveillance license, as mentioned earlier on, is going to be those on-edge analytics. So, for example, with event detection, you've got that motion detection, but you've also got audio detection, something that I don't think was mentioned in enough locations, where the camera will actually be triggered by ambient noise, which may exceed a certain value, like a car alarm. So again, that's a nice little feature that wasn't given enough credit. Same with the tampering alarm, where if the camera's knocked down or broken down, you've even got disconnection settings there that you can check into what the camera does during the event of a camera disconnection. You know, malicious or accidental, there are options open to you. Personal and vehicle detection. I would like, sometimes when setting this up, I mentioned this in my broader DVA 1622 NAS review, I don't know if that's live yet. Sometimes I don't like that the feed you see on screen isn't immediately apparent, and this is one of those areas that I kind of would like to see that while I'm configuring a lot of these rules. So for example, people detection, so people are being detected, you can set it up so that crowd detection is a thing. So you can have it so that if certain people hang in a certain area for an extended period of time, and there's a certain number of them, you get alerted. Same goes with one person's there, but they're in there for a certain amount of time. And again, unmoving people can be ignored. Same with vehicles, and you can have it so that you can have an area of effect where if cars enter a certain area, it's fine, or other areas, it matters. And again, you can set the rules. If they stay in a certain area for a certain amount of time, you can be alerted that if a car pulls up that's unrecognized. And again, recognition is what DVA systems are for, not these cameras. You can set all of those up, and the parameters can then be sorted out in the feed here. So you have to go into a separate page there. But as you can see with this person detection, I've already set this up that if a person is detected in here, we are alerted. And again, I'll show you those alerts later on. Intrusions, we're able to do not a dissimilar thing, but this time we can run lines where we want to know if people enter or exit certain regions, and then we can choose in the notification and action rule center what happens when those alerts are triggered. These are things that are available from other cameras, it should be added, but not to this extent and not integrated as well into the Synology platform. And again, all of the maintenance options are pretty much what you would expect. Now, if we go into the TC500 cam, things are going to be largely the same. Again, it is more of a stylistic camera choice rather than the camera itself being in any way meaningfully different. And again, because I don't have the kind of roof access to do this as the turret camera high up, it has limited the way I can utilize this camera, but I can confirm that all of the settings are exactly what you'd expect, and the picture quality is pretty darn good. And again, scalable, it doesn't go up to 4K, but there is a tremendous amount of scalability in what these cameras can output when needed on both the balanced and the high quality viewpoint there. Now, if we go into the recording patterns there, this is where a lot of that recognition is going to stand out. So to put that into perspective, thanks to us using the DVA, we've actually got different kinds of recognition. So with the DVA system, of course, I've got facial recognition on a database. None of this, I repeat, none of this is available with the camera. With the camera, what you get is detection, but you don't get further information on what those things, if it's going from a database. So for example, in the facial recognition, if we go back to that, we're able to see that I've already added 4 people. Again, you'd need a DVA system in order to do this, but I've given all these people their names, and therefore when they enter the field of camera view, it knows who they are and what privileges they have. Whereas general detection will tell us when it's a person, when it's a vehicle, when things are entering one of those areas of effect, those lines, whether they're lingering, and all of those things are filtered on the right hand side where you can say, I want it to come down to people, I want it to come down to vehicles. That allows the camera to recognize that, but it's beyond that and accessing recognition where things change. Now, we've already talked about this before when it comes to going for Synology cameras. One of the advantages, of course, notwithstanding the integration of these cameras into the existing surveillance station layout, is the fact they don't require a camera license. So as you can see there on my feed, if we open that up a little bit, you're able to see that I have got 5 cameras on this system up and running. So we've got 5 cameras, a mobile camera, 2 third-party ONVIF, and Synology's own cameras there. And again, if we go into the licensing sensor there, you can see we've got 8 camera licenses included and only 3 have been occupied. Why 3? Because, of course, the Synology ones don't need it. We're only utilizing the camera license for those. So I can confirm that it definitely doesn't use the licenses. It even keeps track of the maximum number of licenses that can be applied, and you can even access a lot of those keys if you need to migrate them. But do bear in mind you will have to log in and make sure you have the admin credentials in order to do so. Now, when it comes to encryption, as mentioned earlier on, these cameras are NDAA and TAA compliant for that encryption. So if you choose to, it's very easy to enable the encryption on any of these cameras on the fly whenever you need it there. So you can go straight into the advanced tab here and allow you to change not only the protocol, but also enabling that encryption there within the system and that local area network. And again, that encryption extends also to C2 surveillance as well when utilizing these cameras in conjunction with the Synology NAS machine. These cameras do not arrive with surveillance station included. They arrive with the necessity of the NAS having this software, but I will say that the extent to which these cameras can be utilized within surveillance station is still pretty darn good. Notwithstanding, if we look here, there's those cameras there. If we choose to, we can go for this camera here. But for this camera, we're just going to go into the past. We're going to go into earlier that day while the rest of them are live. You can see horrendous rain here in the UK, and the cameras are still delivering that stream quality very, very well to the NVR system. I can also confirm, luck would have it, that these cameras are as waterproof as they say, because here in the UK it absolutely shot it down on the morning of the 20th of June, and these cameras are running absolutely fine there. You can see the old recording there. We've got the watermarks that I've applied there. So we've got the new recordings, and they're on the top right there, both cameras getting absolutely wazzed on there in the background and running absolutely fine there, in between a few little dribs and drabs, but apart from that, absolutely fine. Now, if we use the Smart Time feature on the Synology NAS to look at this camera, we'll get a good understanding of how the camera reacts to day and night cycles. As you can see, the camera did flick automatically into that night view, and as the night wears on, we'll be able to get a closer look on just how well this camera dealt with night view. Now, again, it is going to be heavily dependent on your own setup and where you deploy the camera, and fair play to Synology on their own website. There is a breakdown on how to set up the cameras right the first time with installation and configuration, getting it done and getting the camera angles right. They do help you along the way on that one. But for me, the transition between night and day and the alerts did not stop coming, I should add, during the nighttime cycle there. So if we cycle down into kind of much earlier recordings down, we go for motion detection, and we cycle down by the filter. We go in there, filter by the time of day. We'll be able to look onto the earlier recordings there. That's from the previous day, about when the night vision kicked in. We're able to see that the night vision was still able to detect people. It was able to detect motion. It was still doing everything we wanted it to do during that period, and still had all of the recognition. So again, the kind of knowing it's a person, knowing it's a car that's built into this camera was still supported even during that night vision. So it was still doing its job. It's a little grainy, and again, dependent on your own personal setup. But for me, the fact that those notifications and recognition still worked is what really stood out for me. Now, discussing the camera quality is going to be a little tougher, largely because we're recording this right now with OBS, and that can affect the frame rate from what you're seeing. However, we can talk a little bit about those streaming profiles. So, for example, the BC500 there, if we go in and edit some of those settings, we're able to see with the viewpoints there what exactly the quality is going to be. So we can, again, create a dynamic stream where things will change on the fly, or we can go ahead and get the audio and video in the high quality to be adapted. So at the moment, it is set to the highest quality, although with a variable bit rate that we can change between, and the same goes for the photo quality as well within that high resolution. So anytime you can go in, and again, if we remove one of the cameras, we'll just focus on just the one of them, the picture quality is pretty darn good. If we go to the stream profile and go for the balanced quality profile, the frame rate does drop. The pixelization was a little bit in there. We can go to the lower profile, which will maintain a much more consistent bandwidth there, and it will probably allow fewer drops there. But ultimately, you can flick between them quite quickly and go directly into the camera's own individual settings as you see fit. But it's all fair and well to talk about streaming quality. What about the downloaded files? Well, I can tell you right now, I'm quite happy with the quality of what I saw. We can go ahead and record it, play it there. Again, we are using OBS right now, so there may be a drop in frame rate. But for me, that's a decent quality image there. It's allowing us to see everything. And on top of that, if you do want to utilize some of those smart search functionalities or smart time lapse, this does still allow you with that picture quality to really make the most of what these are capable of. So again, if we go for an item there, we go for the whole area of effect, we set that up with somewhere else and utilize that camera quality internally within the NAS. With Smart Search, the camera quality feed that's being presented to you is still good enough in order to take advantage of the Smart Search features there. I mean, ultimately, Synology's camera here, they've not invented a brand new kind of camera, okay? I think that's really, really important to bear that in mind. But what you have here is a camera that is a good alternative to third-party cameras that people have been utilizing on their own platform for a while. And on top of that, we have got the camera license included. And although you are by no means getting kind of assisted AI supported services of a DVA system, the 1622 or DS321, you are getting more features than you would get from the majority of third-party cameras in the market. Yes, their range is a little slim at the moment at just 2 camera options available, but still having more flexibility, more notifications, and how to tailor those notifications with regards to the edge analytics is going to be beneficial. And they are good quality cameras. They cost a little bit more, but you're not going to need the camera license in order to utilize them. You've got an extra option of edge analytics there included with it, and they are lifetime license. So even though you're getting this camera device, unlike a lot of other cameras, when you want to extend beyond 2 cameras, we have to get a license. These are infinity supported within Surveillance Station. They're not going to stop getting supported by Surveillance Station anytime soon. So you get that longevity in the setup for your needs as well. But let's head back into the studio and summarize this review. Now, I've mentioned it before and I'll say it again. This camera is going to be targeted towards business users more than home. That doesn't mean that home users can't use it, but the amount of that value for money at that 250, 300 nicker mark that a home user is going to be capitalizing on is going to be somewhat minimalized. Yes, its integration and ease of setup within Surveillance Station. Seriously, I've never had a camera set up so quickly with Surveillance Station as their own camera, understandably so, thanks to their integration. you're only going to be doing that once. The build quality is great. The warranty of 3 years is great. The support in surveillance station almost certainly is going to be huge and long term. And Synology are definitely going to be rolling out other cameras down the line. Plus that TAA or NDAA certification is going to be an enormous tick to a lot of businesses out there that want to buy surveillance products, anything related to security, and are going to live and die by that certification. When they look at cameras again from ANC, from Reolink and more, and then see made in China and that lack of certification, they are going to turn away. And that's going to be an enormous plus with this camera. When you look at that price point and compare it then against NDAA and TAA certified cameras, you suddenly see that price point is actually pretty competitive compared to some of the other ones out there. And this not being built in the US and being built in Taiwan and still carrying that certification allows its price point to become more competitive than a lot of US manufactured cameras, which unfortunately are just not going to be as low price as this. Also, the lack of a needed license within surveillance station is going to be hugely appealing to those expanding an existing surveillance setup or are setting it up for the first time and are weighing up the pros and cons in terms of proprietary support and buying into a Synology ecosystem. However, home users, that price tag is very high, and unless Synology release some more value series alternatives to this, maybe some local home plug-in ones, I can't see a lot of lower-end home users swallowing that price point. Yes, these cameras are going to last for a very long time, and that you need to support that functionality, and that price waivers factors in the surveillance license. It's still going to be a lot for home users to buy, and also only having 2 cameras right now is going to be slightly off-putting for a lot of users who, when they look at third-party alternatives that have tens if not hundreds of different camera types for their own user case scenarios, that's going to be a big draw too. Now, those on-edge AI features, some of those are available on third-party cameras. Not all of them allow those features, have those supported features within surveillance station to be utilized. But if you don't need them, then there's no point paying extra for them. You know what I mean? Now, the other thing I will add with regards to Synology's own cameras, and I touched on this earlier, is this. The DVA1622 was the one we used for the software review of this camera. And what I will highlight is that this having 8 camera licenses rolling out at $599, 8 camera licenses, runs DSM and surveillance station. It is a great 2-bay NAS. But this having DVA video analysis inside, although just 2 tasks that you can schedule, sort of undermines this a little bit, because the extra, the camera license that's inclusive of it doesn't become a factor when you've already got 8 to play with. Now, if you're going to exceed that 8 and have 16 cameras, remember, you can only run 2 deep analysis tasks at any given time. That kind of, if you're going for this, there is a question mark whether you need this. And therefore, for your Synology surveillance setup, it does beg the question, is it better to spend extra on the cameras and go for a different Synology NAS, or going for a DVA system such as this one or the DVA3221 that has the analysis on the host, not the edge, a better way to spend your money? I like the fact that Synology is diversifying and covering these bases, but there's no denying that their cameras are ever so slightly undermined in some cases in the setup by their own DVA appliance, and sort of in the other way as well, but more on that in another video soon. Ultimately, the TC500 camera for me is a great camera for business, be it small, medium, big, or even enterprise level deployments there. And the price tag that at the home and hobbyist and even prosumer level may seem a bit high, once you go into the business territory and go into the single ecosystem territory, and particularly when you really are going to be reliant on surveillance station, a great bit of software by the way, then this camera makes a whole lot of sense. I just wish Synology had more different kinds of camera out there and a better range and portfolio of different solutions and prices right now. Now, it's going to take time. They've only just rolled them out. We're probably going to see that realise itself over time, the same way we've seen it with their storage media, NVMe, SATA SSD, enterprise hard drives, and regular class hard drives now. That same methodology is going to apply to these cameras, but at the moment, there's only the 2 cameras. And I think right now, until we see the full range get a little bit more fleshed out, unless you plan on going for a dome or a bullet, it might be worth holding it just a little bit longer as well. But ultimately, it is a great camera that integrates with a great piece of software. It's just arriving at a little bit of price tag there that you may need to keep in mind. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching. Again, we've got a whole bunch of surveillance content coming soon, and we're going to be directly comparing more and more these cameras from Synology with third parties out there that we've reviewed in the past. If there's a specific camera or brand that you want us to look at, and we see some more recurrent names there, we will jump down and see if we can get hold of those for a comparison, so do let us know. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching. Should be a written review live very, very soon, link below. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.